Hello, everyone. It's me, China Rain, and today we are here to talk about codependent relationships. Therapy is in session. Let's get started. So, I guess the best place to start would be in defining what a codependent relationship is, okay? In its most basic form, it's when one person needs to be needed by another person. And that other person we will refer to as the enabler. Okay. And this cycle that's created between the codependent and the enabler is what we refer to in therapy as a cycle of dependency. All right. And I'm not just referring to when I say needing to have a person, I'm saying that their self worth, their purpose is completely tied into the needs of the enabler. That would be a better description of what I'm trying to illustrate. All right, so let's check out this clip right here.
I remember being kind of in denial that I was codependent when my therapist brought it up, and I was like, the title, the word, I was like, no, that's not me. I'm just a really considerate person. I'm someone who's just really nice, and I want to make everyone feel comfortable, and that's not a bad thing. And I realized that when we kind of walked through examples and like real life scenarios and noted how my nervous system was completely dysregulated around certain people, and then that template was being repeated over and over with various relationships, I was like, oh my God, okay. Like, I think the awareness is 75% of the work. To be aware of that within a relationship is so profound.
Life, codependency is enmeshment. Codependency is saying, I can't survive without finding a way for you to see me. When I can figure out how to help you to see me and my needs, then that's when I'm okay. That's codependency. I can't do until you do. What does that sound like? That sounds like that wounded child. That sounds like, Mommy, help me. Daddy, rescue me. Well, I can't. I need you. And unfortunately, we're adults now. And our parents are either completely oblivious to what happened, or they're still struggling themselves with some of the same issues they had when they was trying to raise us. So we can't look to them no more. You can't look to, it's not your spouse's role anymore to take care of you now. See, spouses, partners, dating, friends, these are relationships where we should already be coming whole in.
All right. It's important to note that a codependent relationship can exist not only in romantic partnerships, but also just between platonic friendships. It can occur between family members. And I think I have counseled more family dynamics around codependence than I have partner. That's just my own personal experience. However, they all exist and they manifest itself differently in each one of those relationship dynamics. Okay. All right. So, one or both parties in the relationship could be considered codependent. And that's just a method for disaster, quite frankly. Typically, you will see one person is the codependent and then the other person is the enabler. I would say that that would be the more common scenario. However, two codependents existing in a relationship do exist. Now, with that being said, the enabler's role is also dysfunctional, right? Because they're all too happy to have their needs met. but they don't know how to cope in a normal two-sided functioning relationship. And so the two of them together, it makes for a toxic relationship. All right, let's check out this next clip.
In order to overcome codependency, you first need to understand what it is. And so what it is a silent agreement between two people to stay their wounded selves. In codependent dynamics, there is an unconscious need that is taking place. There's this unconscious pull that can be physically and emotionally exhausting. Your nervous system can really feel the consequences of it. And now, in these relationships, even after they're seemingly broken, people end up staying because they're stuck in a fog. Fear, obligation, and guilt. So the first step to healing any codependent dynamic is identifying and differentiating your true feelings from your perception of their feelings. Because in codependency, we like to moderate other people's feelings. We take the emotional temperature of other people. We are so concerned with how the other party feels. So again, this first step to healing any codependent dynamic, not just romantic codependent dynamics, is to identify and differentiate your true, authentic feelings from your perception of theirs. The way you feel is not contingent on their feelings.
Husband alcoholic है, wife is over working. मतलब वो 2 jobs करती है, super efficient है. Wife is always taking care of the husband, so she gets appreciation. Wife की self worth उसी में से आती है कि मैं इसका ध्यान रखती हूँ. She has grown up with extremely low self-worth, feeling कि मैं कुछ नहीं कर सकती हूँ, I'm useless. Now, when everybody says कि यार तेरे बगैर तो घर चलेगा ही नहीं यार, तू इतना काम करती देख कुछ नहीं कर रहा है, look at you. So what is happening? Her self-worth is being fed by her constant need to take care of this. Now when this guy says नहीं नहीं आज तू ऑफिस मत जा, मैं आज कुछ करूँगा, cannot. This is what happens with a lot of couples. She will sabotage all his chances of recovering. Because they've set into a beautiful pattern. The more she performs, the more she is efficient, the lesser and lesser he will do things. He will sink into more and more this side. And if he tries to be this way, she will sabotage everything because for her self-worth is coming from overcare.
So next, we're going to quickly go over the signs of codependence. All right. And I'm going to read them because there are 10 of them and then I don't want to miss them. The first would be excessive caretaking, prioritizing the enabler's needs over your own. The second would be enabling behaviors, covering up or rescuing the other person from their own natural consequences. And I want to talk about that a little bit more. The codependent does things, it's almost like they're getting a fix, if you will. Right. And so everything they do, they're doing it for themselves to get that fix. They're meeting their needs. And so everything comes back to it being about them. So if they do something for you, it's really not about that person that they're doing it for. It's about, look at me. They make it completely about them. It's almost narcissistic, but this is different. Let's stay on path here. All right. Obsessive thinking, constantly worrying about the other person. An example of that would be if you were to go on a vacation independent of the enabler, you're constantly thinking about them and their needs and what their thoughts are and so on and so forth. And so much so that you can't separate and individualize and have a good time because your thoughts are with that person. All right. The next one is fear of abandonment, dread of rejection or separation, which we just kind of hit on a little bit. People pleasing, compromising your values just to avoid conflict. Control issues, manipulating or micromanaging the other person. Next would be emotional dependency, relying on the other person for some sort of emotional validation. The next would be sacrificing personal needs, neglecting self-care and your interests, which we just talked about that briefly as well. Difficulty expressing emotions, suppressing your feelings to avoid conflict. Because again, you going back to fear of abandonment, you don't want to express your problems that you may have because you have a fear that this person may leave you, and that's something that you just don't want to deal with because your self-worth, your sense of purpose is tied in with this individual. Okay, let's check out the next clip.
How do you avoid being codependent?
That's a crazy ass dance. A part of it is facing off with our programming. Again, I already spoke to this earlier, but if I understand that my whole life has been set up to figure out what you need and want, mommy and daddy, so that I can feel safe to therefore go be who I am, then that over time, let's call it 10 to 15 to 16 years of my life was set up that way. You think I'm going to come out of 16 years of programming and conditioning and go into a new relationship and not have that same setup? It's 100% going to be there. So the first step is to go, oh my God, look what I'm coming out of. Can you help me, new partner? Can you help me untangle and unweave and cut the cords of codependence? Anybody going into any relationship where you understand that you're super connected and that codependence is possible, you have to talk about it. You two have to talk about it.
You'll know that codependency really is not being able to tolerate the discomfort of other people. It's similar to people pleasing. You're taking care of other people better than you take care of yourself. You're not okay unless everybody else is okay. So basically, it's sacrificing your own identity, feelings, and needs in favor of another person's desires or approval. And I have been guilty. As a child, I learned that expressing my own needs or emotions led to the disapproval, rejection, or withdrawal of affection from my father. And ultimately, I turned into a people pleaser and codependent. I was constantly trying to get and earn the approval of my dad so he would not abandon me. And ultimately, he did, which is still really hard to say. When we're codependent, we tend to overcommit and sacrifice our own personal time and interest in order to cater to the other person's. We isolate from our friends and other people in order to spend more time with our new love interests. Oh God, I'm so guilty. And we avoid conflict by not expressing our needs and what we want to maintain peace, but generally at the expense of our own happiness. But eventually, you become resentful. And you really hate that you give everything to them and they don't give anything back. And ultimately, you get really frustrated and feel really unfulfilled with the relationship. Because what we're really looking to have is interdependency, not codependency or radical independency. Because that really can't exist in a partnership. So I had to work on first recognizing my codependency by journaling so that I could see the patterns that I was doing. Then I had to reclaim my identity by going back to doing the interest that really brought joy to me, which meant I had to set boundaries with the people around me so that they weren't consuming me. And boy, did they not like it. Then I had to learn to be assertive and say what I mean without saying it mean and tell them what I needed. And most of the time I realized that they didn't give a shit what I needed. They liked that I catered to their needs though. And then the hardest part is I had to regulate my emotions so that I was okay with the discomfort of others, so that I was okay with being a villain in somebody's story, and so that I could enforce my boundaries and be a woman of my word. Because I wanted to make myself proud. There's not a lot of time left in my life, and I don't want to spend the rest of that being a doormat. Ultimately, I was abusing myself by neglecting me. And I had to learn to empower myself to live the life that I wanted to live. And I had to stop being this people-pleasing, selfless person and instead prioritize my own self-care. Because you can't put an oxygen mask on other people if you don't first put it on yourself. And that was a really hard lesson to learn that I'm still always working on.
Okay. So if you're asking, how did we get here? How does a codependent relationship even develop? I have the answer for you. All right. Codependency is a learned behavior, and it typically stems from past behavioral patterns and some type of an emotional difficulty. So, according to experts in the literature, they say that it can result from some of these situations that I'm getting ready to cover. The first would be damaging parental relationships. Okay. So, if people who are codependent as adults may have had problems with their parental relationships as a child or as a teenager. So, for example, that parent may have been an emotionally or physically absent parent. That parent could have had a problem with addiction to drugs or alcohol. Okay, so, and as a result of that, children learn to have their needs met by doing caretaking things. They seek out validation and approval. And that it ultimately can end to them later on as an adult seeking out these codependent relationships. Okay. All right. And also, these situations may cause gaps in emotional development in the child, leading them later to codependent relationships. Okay. The second would be living with a mentally or physically ill family member. So, codependency may result from caring for a person who is chronically ill or they have some type of a physical disability. Being in the role of caregiver, especially and particularly if it's a child. So, let's say you have a handicapped parent and they have a younger child, and that child is constantly, the person cleaning up, the person, helping their parent to the bathroom or whatever the case is. These behaviors could lead to them ultimately seeking out a codependent relationship as an adult. Also, you could be an adult who has this role of caretaking. So let's say you have ailing parents that you are caring for, and somewhere in there you lost your distinction of just caring for them, and now everything is about codependence. So then you seek out codependent relationships. How can I insert myself into another codependent relationship where I can have my needs met so that my self-worth is there? Okay. Another area that could lead to codependent relationships is abusive families. So, physical, emotional, and sexual abuse can have long lasting psychological problems, but it can also lead to developing codependent relationships because that is a cycle of abuse that you are familiar with. You have, as drastic as it may sound, you have developed a certain comfort level with that. And so ultimately, that could lead you to seeking out codependent relationships. Okay, finally, how do we get rid of this? How? Luckily, there is treatment for codependency. Now, the first thing that I would suggest is that you go into therapy, whether it's group therapy or individual therapy, because they have the tools to help you sort through what needs to happen to get you out of this mess. Okay? And things that you can do for yourself is set appropriate boundaries. Learn to say no. Prioritize self-care. The goal here is that you have some level of separation between you and the enabler so that you can find you. That's the key, okay? Again, so you're seeking self-awareness. Identify your emotions and needs. Develop emotional regulation. Learn how to manage stress and anxiety. Encourage independence. That means support your partner, your enabler's ability to do things on their own. You need to support that and not be the person providing all the time. Okay? Seek support through therapy, whether it's individual or group. I cannot stress that enough. All right. Thank you for joining us today, and I'll see you at our next session. Peace.